Hi everyone, talking to you from on the road. I want to talk to you a bit about something that I've noticed on a lot of these anti-Israel protests on the campuses and the marches. Whenever you see a lot of them, have you noticed that many of them are wearing masks? Have you noticed this? This is something Douglas Murray noticed and wrote about in a recent column, and I want to read to you what he said. But it's made me think, like, why are so many of them wearing masks? What's it coming down to ultimately? Is it because they're just scared of COVID? Is that, and there's just a crossover between people who are hyper concerned with COVID and are anti-Israel? Well, maybe, but he suspects that it's something else. And it's actually to do with perhaps a deeper subconscious shame, which is really interesting and really telling. I noticed that even recently, when I saw the anti-Israel protests outside the cinema in East Finchley, where they were showing the horrors of what happened on October 7th. Can you imagine what it would take? Can you imagine what it would take to bring yourself to want to go and protest outside a showing of an atrocity, of a massacre? The depravity of such an act, of a modern form of Holocaust denial. So Douglas thinks the masks that we saw, I saw it happen there in East Finchley. I saw lots of mask wearing. Douglas thinks that it's to do with shame. I want to read to you what he said. The headline he wrote is, "Take off the masks, you anti-Israel cowards. Protesters aren't really scared of COVID. They're hiding shame of their prejudice." This is what he said. "Remember when we were all told to mask up? Well, perhaps it's time for us to change that rule. How about mask off? It still astonishes me how many New Yorkers still scuttle around this city with their N95s clasped to their faces, assistants in shops, strap hangers on the subway, even people hurrying through the windy streets. With some people, I get it. A few have underlying health conditions like morbid obesity, or different bodiness, or whatever it is we're allowed to call what we used to term overweight. And sure, some elderly folks now on their 9th boosters have decided to treat COVID as they once did the winter flu season. But how to explain all the young people, particularly the young protesters, who seem to be so unnaturally scared of COVID? How to explain all those rage-filled, keffiyeh-wearing students who just happen to mask up whenever a camera is around? Perhaps the students at Columbia and other campuses really do have a mortal fear of COVID, in which case let me set their minds at rest. New York State no longer has a COVID-19 problem. At the heart of COVID, in the week ending April 11th, 2020, the CDC reported that there were 6,900 total NY State COVID deaths that week. By last month, the total was down to 15 deaths in a week. What is more, young people are at the lowest risk of dying from COVID. Last year, COVID was the 8th leading cause of death for young people in the United States. According to the official data, people aged 18 to 29 comprise just 0.7% of COVID-related deaths in the US, and that is from a group that makes up 16.4% of the total US population. College-age Americans are more likely to die by homicide, suicide, or being hit by a bus than they are through complications caused by COVID. Even better news for the mask wearers, NY State is one of the most vaccinated populations in the world. Fully 81% of NY State's population is fully vaccinated, while a full 95% of the state's population has gotten one dose of the vaccine or more. So rejoice, O brave protesters, the masks can come off. And yet, with something like inevitability, there is one thing you can predict about protesters in New York today, which is that any time they're protesting, they'll be strangely scared of COVID. At the height of the BLM protests in 2020, you might say there was some excuse for this. There's nothing like a fear of COVID to keep you cautious as you smash up a store. Indeed, I'm sure that it was always perfectly natural that people swiping a set of sneakers for social justice would at the same time mask up to protect their respiratory system. But why is it that in 2024, today's brave protesters in New York are nearly always wearing a mask? Why should it be that the students making their demands for ceasefires in the Middle East and humanitarian aid at home have to holler their demands through a piece of cloth? What is it about the outside troublemakers who come onto this city's campuses that makes them at one and the same time brave enough to cause disruption to students and citizens and get terrible hypochondriacs over COVID? Well, I would like to suggest a reason, Douglas says, and it has nothing to do with CDC data. vaccination rates, COVID, or anything similar. The reason is that they are bullies. And like all bullies, they are at the same time terrible cowards. Despite pretending that they are world-beating revolutionaries, the protesters who now push people in this city around are trying to keep their identities hidden. Perhaps it's because they are professional agitators, drafted in by a range of left-wing grassroots organisations to cause trouble. That is certainly what many people, including the police, believe. Perhaps these people want to cover their faces because the media in this country might just notice that the same professional revolutionaries tend to turn up wherever there is trouble, almost as if they are paid to do so. Presumably they want to keep their identities hidden as much as possible. But what about the students at Columbia and elsewhere who want to sit in their tents and bravely post about something they don't know anything about? Maybe, just maybe, they too are not actually afraid of COVID. What they are afraid of are the opinions they are espousing. Because they know at some level that bullying other students and shrieking about things they don't know about is not a good look. They want to intimidate people, but they never want to be intimidated themselves. So I have a suggestion. At all future protests in New York State, let's have a masks off policy. The KKK was the last organisation in America that was so proud of their beliefs that their members covered their faces during protests. Now, students for jihad are doing the same job, for strangely similar reasons. So, let's demand they take the hoods off too. Sorry, I meant masks. Talking of Columbia, yesterday morning I was invited to give an alternative commencement address to students who have completed their studies. Since the leadership at Columbia had cancelled their official graduation ceremony, a number of faculty and student leaders arranged an alternative event for students and their families. Attendees at the event in the city included students who had served in the US military, Jewish students, Christian students, and conservative students, all from a bewildering variety of backgrounds. We also heard from one of the students who had protected their campus when student radicals were trying to trash it earlier this year. It was a great honour to speak with them all, and a great pleasure to give them a few words of advice as they set off on what I'm sure will be great and adventurous careers. But what an indictment that students at Columbia who can actually think have to organise a graduation for themselves. We're grateful to Douglas for talking sense, talking sanity, but particularly I think around this point of masks. In some ways, this actually should give us all a cause for hope and for belief that the status quo is not necessarily going to remain the same. Because if so much of the mask wearing actually comes from a place of shame, then that means a lot of people really know what's true. They know truth and falsehood. They know good and evil, even if they try to suppress it and deny it and cover it up. Even they have a sense of shame. So let's continue to tell the truth. Let's continue to make it clear to people that the Jewish people belong in their ancient, God-given homeland, the land of Israel. They have every right to fight off their enemies, and they do it in the most moral way. They've always wanted to extend their hand in peace, and they want peace. And we, the Jewish people, taught the world about the value of world peace as an ideal, and that we will not be lectured by the rest of the world. Quite the opposite. We are the world's morality teachers. That is what we were instructed to be by God himself. And so we should feel hopeful that the world is going to get better, that people will change, and that we're going to get more and more support for Israel. But we have to do our part in articulating the truth, being confident and being uncompromising. Let's not be fearful. Let's not engage with those. Let's not try to appease those and thinking that will be the path towards peace. Appeasement never works, and our enemies sense weakness when they see appeasement. No, the only approach is peace through strength, and strength comes from confidence and truth-telling. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and you're watching JTV.
Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.